Dr. Melanie Barton is an experiencer and also a psychotherapist. She's also an ordained minister, an advocate, and an author. She recently spoke at a Contact and Consciousness Summit on raising your vibrational frequency while connecting to your higher consciousness, and she joins us now. Hello, Melanie, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I mentioned you're a contact experiencer. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences and how far back it goes?
It goes back as far as infancy, and it goes back beyond that to my grandmother used to talk about little green Martian men that she had to have contact with. For me, I always had a guide that was with me until I went to kindergarten. He was about a 3-foot tall gray, and I nicknamed him Robbie. And he and I would have ongoing conversations that would be telepathic. And when I got ready to go to kindergarten, he told me that he was going to have to go. And I said, "What do you mean go?" And he said, "Well, I can't go to school with you." And I said, "But why not? You're my friend." And he said, "Well, not everybody can see me, and not everybody's going to understand me." And of course, my parents didn't. They thought I was crazy, like they claimed that my Granny Mildred was. And so he told me that he would still be around, but that I wouldn't necessarily be able to see him. And so he left, and I kind of forgot about him until other events happened in my life. And I can go into that now if you want. It's all connected with
Well,
it.
I just wanted to ask firstly, as a child and having experiences like that, did that have any effect on you? Did it cause issues like kind of making you a bit of an outsider at school?
I was an outsider, and I was very sickly as a child, so I lost a lot of time from school. And while I was losing time from school, I was having contact not just with things like Robbie, but I could see fairies. I could communicate with them. I would see spirits. I would see angels. And I just thought everybody did. And my parents would say to me, "Don't talk about that stuff. People will think you're crazy like Granny, so don't do that." So I learned to squelch that. And I would know things that were going to happen, and I would sometimes blurt it out, but then it would be like, "No, no, you can't, don't do that." And so over time, I tried to squelch it, but the more I tried to squelch it, the more I became confused, because to me, this was a natural part of who I was, but I was told, "You can't do that."
Yeah, and I think back to when I was at school, like elementary and high school, and there were always the kids there that seemed normal on the outside, but you knew something was bothering them, and they seemed to kind of be a little bit of an outsider. And I always thought it may have been a problem at home, but maybe it was that they were having experiences. I mean, would you agree with that? I mean, would that
Yes,
make sense?
yes, it would. And as I grew up and studied psychology and social work and psychotherapy, I learned that a lot of these people had the same kind of experiences that I did, and they just learned to go inward, and they would have their own private world inside or around like-minded people, but to the rest of the world, they were just odd. They didn't fit in.
Yeah. So your parents also didn't believe your grandmother's stories?
Oh, in my book, Quicksand, it talks about that. The reason they tried to squelch it is that my mother was psychic as well as my grandmother. And my mother didn't want to be ostracized like her mother was. So she tried to quell it in me, to quiet it, so
Mm,
that I wouldn't encounter the same things.
right. Okay, so moving on as from a child, so the experiences continued?
Oh, yes. When I was in high school, my mom and my sister, my parents were divorced by this point. They went away for a weekend, and I was having a fever because I was sick a lot. And so I opted to stay home. And when I stayed home, I was reading the Sunday school paper that I got, and it talked about ghosts. And it scared me so bad that I went downstairs and put it outside in our rubbish barrel so that I wouldn't have to see it. And I went back in the house and I went to bed. And when I got up to get something out of my closet in the morning, that Sunday school paper was on my closet floor. And I could feel that the evil that that paper talked about was in the house, and I became frozen. I couldn't do anything. So I learned through church, that this was an evil spirit and that I needed to get rid of it, but I didn't know how to do that. So I continued to be very overly involved in church, thinking that that would make me normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it did exactly the opposite. And so in October of 1969, a spirit showed up at the end of my bed. I look at it now as an angel. And it told me that I was to go to Rochester, New York, where my sister had moved to, and that I was to go there. And I said, no, I don't want to go there. There's people there that I know that I don't want to be around. And it just said, go. So within 48 hours, I had packed up everything and I moved to Rochester, New York to follow what the spirit said. So from there, I had other encounters. We lived in a haunted house in Syracuse, New York. And I knew that it was haunted because I could see the person. So I went across the street to my landlord and I said, so who is it that's in the basement that's hammering and sawing all the time at night? And he laughed and he said, oh, that was Mr. I think it was McNeil or something was his name. He said he died at his workbench in the house. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, well, he's still there. So when I would go out of the house and come back, the lights were on. At one point in time, there was music playing on the radio that was called My Melanie Makes Me Smile. So I called the radio station to ask who's the musician that's singing that. They said, we're not playing that song.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yes.
But were these incidences malevolent, or were just kind of mischievous?
Then I thought they were seeking to do me harm, but I found out later they were just because they knew I could see them. They were trying to let me know they were there. And over time, through other experiences, I learned how to acknowledge them. And for many of them, they didn't know they were dead. And my job was to help them go to the light, which eventually I did.
Right, right. Did the did your grey ET friend ever return?
Yes. Um, on February 26, 1991, during surgery, I had a near death experience. You go through the traditional tunnel. The person that greeted me there was Mitchell. Mitchell was 16 at the time in the experience. He was the son I miscarried. And I recognized him immediately, called him by name, and he knew me. And he ferried me across the water to the other shore. And on the shore were the loved ones that died, my Granny Mildred, my Grandpa Albert, Robbie, the
Mm-hmm.
ET, the spirit guide that lived in my wardrobe in my bedroom, the Indian chief, the spirit that was at the end of my bed. And they all said to me, we are all connected. We're all one. It's all about love. And I said, well, this is my second near death experience. So do I get to stay now? And they said, no. And I said, well, why did you bring me here? They said, because before you came into this incarnation, you agreed to do certain things. And we need to help you get on track to do that. So we're going to show you what it is that's going to happen. You won't remember it until it happens. So they brought me back in my body. When I woke up, I was different. I was not the same person. I was no longer religiously rigid. I didn't believe in a literal heaven and hell. I knew that everything was connected. And they said, your mission for this lifetime, you are to love those that feel unlovable, including my mom at the time, until they can love themselves. And then from that time forward, they began to speak to me more directly, more clearly, show
Mm-hmm.
me things I was supposed to do, including setting up a holistic healing practice, complete with a massage therapist, nutritionist, chiropractor, all of those things, and did that within 90 days. So,
Wow, wow. And now you counsel other experiences.
right, and as well as other things in my psychotherapy practice. But yes, I do.
Okay, just on the near-death experience, were you given the life review in either of the experiences you had?
I had had hypnosis done years prior to that because I kept have a reoccurring vision and I wanted to know what it was. I was irrationally afraid of water and I couldn't figure out why. So through hypnosis, went through the life review and saw the lifetime where I had been this person who I was given a brand new car by my husband in that lifetime, drove the car, but I always had trouble with right and left. And instead of putting my foot on the brake, I put it on the gas pedal, went over the bridge and drowned.
Wow.
And
Gee.
I relived that in the hypnosis. And then the angels took me heavenward, and then I waited till my next lifetime. Well, that wasn't sufficient for me, being the kind of investigative person I was. I wanted to go see if this was real. So I went back to Massachusetts to what I had seen in the hypnotic session, found the church, found the cemetery, found all the things to document what had happened.
Wow. In the interviews I've done on the on NDEs, a lot of people have their life reviews, and they see that their life is basically being planned, and they get to choose. They get to choose the life they come to, and then my question was, well, does that explain why you get two people who both get the same opportunities in life, um, and can both go along the same path, but one's successful and one's terribly unsuccessful? Is this got to do with having your life planned from the beginning?
The way that I perceive it is that we get choices. We are given the opportunity to learn lessons. If we learn the lesson, we've completed that lesson, we can go on to another one. But if you don't complete it, lessons are repeated until learned. So for me, in this present lifetime, I was married to a person that I had been with multiple lifetimes before. When I was able to finally get out of this dysfunctional marriage, I could feel a clipping, a disconnection finally, that I finally got the message that I wouldn't have to come back and do this again.
Mhm. I found it interesting, when you said that that Robbie was there in that near-death experiences, and we're all connected. So us as human beings and ETs and interdimensional beings, so we're all one.
Yes, we're all part of the collective consciousness. Yes, we're at just different vibrational frequencies. Yes.
Okay. In your counseling of experiences, what's the biggest issue you deal with when somebody comes to you and they want to talk about their experiences?
They're afraid they're crazy. They're afraid that somebody's going to lock them away if they talk about it, or they're afraid they've done something wrong, or that they don't have any control over the situation. And I help them to understand, to normalize the situation, to figure out what was the purpose that they were contacted or abducted, to help them normalize it, figure out what they're supposed to get out of the experience, and to help them realize they probably already have a family connection to these beings, and to help them establish that and get comfortable with it and learn from it.
Right. Is there healing involved? Do they need to heal over something?
A lot of times, what's happening is they're getting a physical healing from the experience. For many of them, there are different kinds of tools that are used on their body, as has been on me. And so that you'll see marks on your body like fingerprints or a bruise or an indentation, or for me, it's like three circles, three little dots and a half circle. And that to me is evidence they've worked on me. So I will talk to the person and I will ask, okay, do you have any physical ailments? Yes. Okay, describe it to me. They do. And I say, well, when this experience happened, what happened with that physical symptoms? And they said, it's been better. I said, okay, there might be a connection.
Hmm. Do any of the experiences refuse to acknowledge what's going on with them, and they just try and ignore it?
I've had some try, yes. They're not very successful at it. It's just like you're trying not to think about pink elephants. It keeps running through your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Does that have an effect on their mental state along the line? Do they get into
Yes.
trouble later on?
Some do, some do. Some try to deny it and numb it with alcohol or drugs, and they're not successful. So, yes, it can lead them down a path of one bad choice leads to another bad choice. So,
Mm.
yes, not in all cases, but in some, yes.
Melanie, what about experiences with partners? Somebody's having experiences, and of course, the first person you would tell is your partner, your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, husband, wife. Um, what what kind of issues do you see in relationships when this occurs? Does it tend to split people up?
It can. In my own situation, it contributed to the breakup because the Twilight song, do 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 do. When you would say anything, sometimes they go, "Yeah, you're crazy. Yeah, don't talk about that." So yes, it can cause a division between a couple because especially if they've been contacted, they'll have an increase in their abilities, perceptive abilities, intuition. So they might say something like, at times I've blurted something out that maybe I should have kept quiet because I could just see it and know.
Hmm.
And that can create all kinds of disharmony in a relationship and eventually break it up if the person who's the experiencer decides I really want to explore this further, then sometimes it ends the relationship. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it must be tough for an experiencer with the person that they trust the most is not really wanting to understand what they're going through. There must be a real sense of betrayal there.
It is. And it feels very lonely for the experiencer. They feel betrayed. If these beings are supposed to be benevolent, why are they causing me to have this disharmony? And that's not what it is, but that's how it appears. And once they accept, okay, this relationship isn't working out, maybe I need to explore other things, they will often find after the fact, oh, I couldn't see the whole picture. I can now.
Mm. Have you ever had an instance where somebody wasn't believing their partner that they were having experiences and a non-human intelligence has intervened and kind of kind of shown the partner that yes they are having these experiences?
Um, I have not personally known of some of my clients having that happen, but there's been experiences that took place that the partner didn't want to recognize. Okay, that might be what you're talking about. They just want to ignore it.
Yeah, yeah. You spoke at the recent Consciousness Summit on raising your vibrational frequency while connecting to your higher consciousness. So, what does all this mean?
Okay. I used the example during the summit of the near death experience and how they told me that we are all one, we're all connected, that what one does affects the others. And they told me that I was to connect with them more often. Well, I was taught in 1976 by a Catholic sister during my seminary training of how to meditate and how to journal. And so I've been doing that since 1976. So what they told me during the near death experience was I was to connect with them more often, to meditate more often. And that by connecting with them and meditating, I was going to get more information, what I call downloads. And it's like a building block. The more I do that, the more I learn. The more I learn, the more they'll give me more instructions as to
Hmm.
what to do next. So when I work with people, I teach them how to go inward through what we call your inner sanctum, your internal place that's your launching pad to the other dimensions. And then I lead them in a meditation to connect with the other side. And when you do that, that helps to raise your vibration. And the more that you do it, it helps. And then there's other things, certain kinds of exercise, listening to music that's at a certain hertz level, that will also help to raise your vibration. So different things like that.
Yeah. Um, there just seems to be a lot of law of attraction about the higher consciousness and raising your vibrational frequency. I mean, I'm thinking about teachers like Esther Hicks, who teaches, vibrational frequency and raising your level and higher consciousness. I mean, is that all connected?
Yes, I use Esther Hicks, her information, it's balancing by numbers. That numbers, when you say them out loud, they have a certain frequency, and that frequency can either help or interrupt your natural flow of your health. So I use that. I use the Rife machine. I use Reiki. I use a method called advanced cell training. It's a series of letters and numbers that are said either silently or out loud with music to back it up, which tells your brain to normalize whatever's out of whack and to put it back in balance.
People can use vibrational frequency and to connect with higher consciousness to make contact with ETs as well?
Yes, yes.
Do you teach that?
I don't teach that, but there's others that do. So I can, I do work with a group. Um, that's with Kevin Briggs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't interviewed him,
Yep.
that'd be a good thing to do.
Several times.
Okay. So what we do is I was part of the Earthly Council. We called ourselves Three Musketeers, Four Musketeers. And I led him in a meditation so that he could channel Ort and the other Council of Eight members. And that's how I got introduced to the Council of Eight and have worked with them ever since.
Yeah. Is this something that anyone can do?
I believe it is something anyone can do, but you might need guidance to get you started. But yes.
Right. Is it safe?
A very good question. I believe that every time you do meditation, I use the analogy, it's like you're opening the screen door to let a friend come in that you've welcomed to your home. But when you're doing that, the bumblebees, the flies, the roaches, the bugs can all come in with it. So I do a prayer of protection to anchor somebody by envisioning their feet are redwood tree roots planted deeply in the earth, and out of the top of their head is silvery cord that's connected to the divine. So you tug on those two things to anchor you, and you envision a divine yellow light around you to protect you so that the negative can't come in and detract from the good you're doing.
I've done a couple of stories recently on malevolent ETs hounding certain people, and I asked Kevin Briggs about that, and he said that probably has a lot to do with the level of frequency that they're on. The lower the frequency, the meaner the ET.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, is there some way people can avoid getting on a low frequency?
You need to work with somebody that can help teach you how to raise your vibrational frequency. Yes. And I've worked with clients who, and I'll actually go to their home to do an expulsion of the negative entities that are there, and to do a wall of protection around them, and to teach them how to say to those malevolent beings, you are not welcome here. You are not allowed in my life, in my house, in my mind, out.
Okay. So the bottom line, what are the benefits of connecting to a higher consciousness?
The benefit is that you realize you're part of the whole and that you matter, that your part is just as important as any other part in the whole.
Right, right. Can you relate, I mean, you've talked about your near-death experience, but can you relate an experience or two that you've had connecting to higher consciousness?
Sure. When I do the work, meeting with the council, at times what has happened is I will get like it feels almost like an electrical shock throughout my whole body. There will be a rise in temperature. I will feel almost blissful. And Edgar Mitchell described this same experience that he had on the spacecraft when he was there. And when I had that happen, my phone fried.
Wow.
I had forgotten to put it out in the car when I was doing this meditation. I was with Kevin in the group at the time. And when I took my phone to be repaired, they said, we've never seen anything like this. What happened? I just said, I don't know, because I didn't know. I know. sort of, but I didn't know the technicalities is why it happened. So that was one. And now what they do, since I've met with the Council of Eight, if I have a message that I'm not getting and they're trying to get me to pay attention, they will do a high pitch frequency in my right ear. It's almost like it, I can't even explain it. It'd be like a tone that you
It,
hear, but it's just,
it, it's not something that would kind of sound a little bit like when you have a touch of tinnitus.
I don't know, because I don't know. I think it would be like that, but it's not. It's just a high pitched squeal that's just, it's very loud, and I have to hold my ear because it's like, ow. And
Hmm.
so what they're telling me is, we have a message for you. And then it's like I tune in, okay. And sometimes it's while I'm working with a client, and they'll want to say to me, so and so's aunt is here. Ask them about the lady in the pleated dress. And it's like, sometimes that's not the right timing for me to, talk
Wow.
to a brand new client. And so I will just in my head say, remind me later. Or I will go, okay, I'll try this out. Well, I'm still trying to pay attention to what the client's saying. And I'll just ask, I'll say, who do you know in your life that wore this purple pleated dress? And tears will start, and they'll go, that was my Aunt Mary. I said, okay, what's the significance of that to you? Well, I asked for some sort of sign that she was still around me and that, she isn't lost. And I said, well, she's here.
Yeah, yeah.
And they'll go, that's the confirmation that I was needing.
So is this the same as being psychic?
I would say that it's a skill that was given to me that has developed further because of my contact with beings from other places, whether that be angelic or ETs or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Melanie, I'm one that's on the bandwagon and convinced that the consciousness community are central to ultimate disclosure, but there seems to have been a little bit of a divide since I've been involved in this topic between mainline UFO people and consciousness community. I'd say it's starting to come together a little bit. I think one of the main reasons is that the mainline community, I don't think, buys the fact that all these entities and are all related. They're all the same thing. How would you respond to that?
Well, if they let me answer, I would say my contact with the Council of Eight has taught me they're at a certain frequency. They're not any better or less than angels, spirit guides, but that if you connect on a regular basis, they'll teach you that we are all one. And sometimes when I do the meditation with the Council of Eight, other deceased famous people have come through that I had no clue. I didn't know. On one occasion, Edgar Mitchell came through and just let me know, this was shortly after his death, that I'm here, I'm okay. And he is now what is called a watcher. And a watcher is just kind of a guide, kind of by the side,
Mm-hmm.
and he's there. So I tell people, I don't have to convince you, but if you're willing to let me do some things with you and just see what happens, I'd be willing to experiment with that.
Yeah, yeah. The guide part of this also fascinates me. I've spoken to several near-death experiences that when they come back, they come back into their physical body, they don't see their physical body as themselves anymore. It's who they are in spirit, who they really are, and they have a guide that comes back with them. Do you find this is the case as well?
Yes. I found that when I came back, I didn't fit in my body, that I could look, it's almost like looking from the outside at your body and going, well, that's a physical shell, but it's not really who I am. And the Council of Eight has helped me to understand that sometimes I don't fit in my body, and that because I've selected to make this incarnation, then I'm going to have to endure some of the physical limitations like illness and physical limitations that I have because I opted to stay. They offered about 3 years ago to take me out of here so that I could work from the other side. But I said, no, I'm willing to stay because I have a grandson that I'm helping to raise. I have clients that need me, so I prefer to stay on this side. So at times they'll remind me, you opted to stay in this physical body. Just remember that. Oh,
Hmm.
oh yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So what does it all mean though? I mean, what's the whole purpose of you know, of coming into a human form, living life as a human and then heading back home?
I think overall, because we're all connected, we are a spirit having a human experience. And when we have that human experience, we either learn something from it that helps us to grow in our elevation, our ascension, or we don't get it and we get the option, do you want to come back and do it again? Not really. Well, do you want to get the lesson? Yeah. Then you come back and do it again till you get it. So I think overall, it's an evolutionary process for us as the conscious one, the
Mm,
greater one.
yeah. Now, you are an ordained minister. I'm just changing tact here.
Okay.
Um, do you have any thoughts about aliens and UFOs in the Bible?
Yes. The way I explained things to the congregation when I was preaching as a pulpit minister, there is an event that happens. You have the people who see the event and they decide what they think it is. So then they tell other people and pass the story along. Those people, in turn, eventually 100 years later, write something down based on their culture, based on their time and terminology they understand. Then you have that country is conquered, another language comes in, so you got to translate it into another language. You translate it into another language, and then there's people that decide what should be included in the scriptures and what should not. Then you get it translated into King James English. Then you get Bible scholars who say, no, this is what it means back in the original Hebrew and Greek. And then you've got a pastor who's trying to read and decipher what it means and deliver it. And then you get the person in the pew who the message to them that they get is not going to be the same as everybody else gets. So you got multiple layers of meanings. So I look at it, yeah, there was ET stuff going on, but they didn't have the language to explain it. They didn't have airplanes or spaceships. So they explained it as gods coming down in chariots of fire. Well, that to me would say, okay, it probably was a spaceship.
Hmm. I remember, I mean, I was only about 9 or 10 at the time, and we used to have what we call a religious instruction lesson every week. And I had a Catholic upbringing, and it was like a 2-hour class every week, and our Catholic priest would come to our school and teach all the Catholics. And I asked the question one day, I asked whether the fact that if God is spirit, why does he need a chariot to ride around in? Can't he just appear and disappear when he wants? And I'll never forget it. I mean, I was almost banished from the class for even asking the question.
Religion has boundaries, and it's a black or white kind of environment. Either you believe and stay within the boundaries. If you go out, you're banished. You're not with us. You're not in us. And people become afraid to think outside the box, that means there won't be a box. It'll all be just nothing.
Yeah.
People
Have you,
want meaning.
yeah, do you get much pushback from people in your congregation?
I don't talk about it in my congregation. Um, I'm not serving a congregation right now, but the church that I attend, I'm very limiting what I'm saying to them. There are things that I do that the church pastors know and give me permission to do, like I go around and spiritually cleanse the church. I do prayer protection for those who are coming to worship, but I don't tell everybody about it because I don't want people to go, what? She crazy?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's really fascinating stuff, and I think we're just about out of time. But just finally, for people who know in the pit of their stomach that something's going on with their life and they're not quite sure what it is, and they're not really wanting to speak out about it to even their, you know, the people closest to them in their lives. I mean, what should they do?
Well, they could reach out to me on Facebook or email me, and we can talk about it and see if either they want to work with me or if they want to find somebody in their own local area that can help them with that.
Okay, so they just go to your website?
They can go to my website or they can contact me at drmelaniebarton@gmail.com, or I'm on Facebook, Melanie Barton Bragg.
Great, fantastic. Dr. Melanie Barton, thank you very much. It's been an absolutely fascinating discussion.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Melanie Barton joining us today.